right, Luke 16. We're going through the Gospel of Luke. And I've entitled my sermon, Cooking the Books. So there's different titles for this sermon. One is, which is on the sign outside, are you ready for retirement? And I'm kind of talking about retirement in heaven. Are you ready for retirement in heaven? Cooking the books. Does anyone know what cooking the books means? Cheating, fraud. So you'll see how that fits the message. It's a message on money. I actually wanted to put on the sign, please, if you think of visiting our church, don't come this Sunday. So 16 out of the 34 parables that Jesus gives is on money. There are 2,500 verses in the Bible about money, more than any other topic. So I want to just cover 8. Literally, there's 1,000 good principles. You know, I like reading financial books. There is nothing in a financial book that you cannot find in the Bible. Like, the Bible has it all to begin with. So I'm going to share 8 principles, then we're going to look at the parable in Luke 16. But before I give you my 8 principles on finances that are just kind of a general overview, I figure I would start with some humor. So this is a husband and a wife, and this is a joke, and I hope you get it. When I've been practicing the joke, I'm like, I don't know if everyone's going to get this. So this husband and wife, they just got a brand new house, and they go into the living room, and the wife says to her husband, if it wasn't for my job, we wouldn't have this home and this nice living room. And then they went into the kitchen, and the wife says, if it wasn't for my money, we wouldn't have this nice kitchen. And then they went in the bedroom, and the wife said, if it wasn't for all the money I make, we wouldn't have this nice bedroom. And the husband's just kind of keeping quiet. Well, the utility women started coming to hook up the utilities. The gas person came, and the wife said to her husband, if it wasn't for my money, we wouldn't have heat in our home. The electric person came, and the wife said, if it wasn't for my money, we wouldn't have electricity and lights and water. And near the end of the day, the new furniture started to arrive. And the wife, as they brought in this beautiful living room furniture, the wife said to her husband, if it wasn't for my money, we wouldn't have this nice living room furniture. And then they went to the bedroom furniture came, and the wife said, it wasn't for my money, we wouldn't have this nice bedroom furniture. But the husband's been quiet this whole time, not saying anything, probably smart men, right? But she finally said to him, I want to know what you're thinking. What's on your mind? And he said, well, I didn't want to say, but since you're asking, if it wasn't for your money, I wouldn't be here either. So I thought it was funny, yeah. So here's my 8 fast principles on money before we look at this parable, just as a kind of a background. Number 1, work hard in your calling. So I believe just as God's called me to be a pastor, if you are in tune with the Lord will call you to an occupation or a job that he has for you, that he wants you to serve in, that you're just going to be blessed. In Ecclesiastes, it says there's nothing better for a person to enjoy their calling and their giftedness from the Lord. So are you working a job, some occupation that God has called you to do that will be a blessing not only to yourself but to many other people? Number 2, strive to keep a balance in your work-life commitments. Proverbs 23:4 says, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Have the wisdom to show restraint. So keep a balance in your life. Number 3, be careful of worry and serve the Lord. Luke 12, Jesus, we won't look at it, but Luke chapter 12 goes, don't worry about food and clothing and all of life, Then it's the same verse that's in Matthew 6:33. Seek first, God and the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be given to you as well. Your Father already knows you need these things. And so do not, I like what it says here, too blessed to be stressed. So be careful of worry and just trust the Lord. He's a good God. Save your money little by little. Proverbs 13:11, whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. So start saving your money little by little. And how old should you be when you start doing this? What's your thoughts? How old should you be? Yeah, when I was a kid, my dad would give us an allowance. I got 10 cents. Dad, I know you watch this. 10 cents? Really? All the work I had to do? But my dad made me and my brother open up a passbook savings, which I have no idea if they still have that. And they would write it by hand, deposit it 10 cents or 5 cents. But if you start the habit early, it's good. It will go with you. I know it seems simple to save little by little in your life, but you understand 80% of Americans live paycheck by paycheck. So it's not as simple as it sounds, because most Americans cannot do this, okay? But if you can get into the habit, the earlier, the better. Number 5, although debt is not condemned, you still need to be very careful of the use of it. The rich, Proverbs 22:7, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. So I got to thinking, okay, what should you borrow money for? And I was like, okay, houses, you probably have to borrow for a house. Appreciating items, you're probably going to have to borrow for college, although there's ways you can, reduce that expense. But hopefully the college is going to help you make more money. You might have to borrow for a car. I'm mixed on that one. You might have to borrow for a business. But if you're borrowing on your credit card to go out to restaurants and buy clothing and do vacations, and you really can't pay for it and you're borrowing for that, I think you're going to get yourself into trouble. Number 6, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. Proverbs 22:1, a good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. So your character, your walk with the Lord is more important than just making money. And that led me to a site on the internet where they surveyed, thousands of people and asked them if they would be willing to sell out their name and their character to do something wrong. So, you see the second one there is 15% of Americans said if you paid them, they would shoplift. It's like, So if you're paid, you would be a thief. 10% of Americans would beat up someone if you paid them. So but the next one's interesting to me, is that 10% would commit treason against our country if they were paid. And this surveyed politicians. Now, before I get to that, what percent of Americans believe that this is Americans, that U.S. politicians are corrupt and willing to sell out our country for money? What percent of Americans do you think believe that? 90, 95. You guys, it's only 75%. So I figure the other 25% are kids under 14. That's what I'm thinking. Now, here's the more interesting. When they asked politicians themselves in Washington, D.C., what do you think they answered? The politicians themselves. If their fellow politicians were corrupt and selling out our country. The Republicans were higher. They're in the 80. The Democrats were a little bit lower. But I'm like, that's amazing that the politicians themselves believe that, 70 to 80% of themselves are corrupt and selling our country down the drain. Why don't they just fire each other? Or, So 6% would murder someone, and of course they get jobs by the mafia, I guess. All right. 7th, honor the Lord with your wealth. So Proverbs 3, 9-10, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. And this is the one area where God says, you can test me, give, and see that I don't bless you. And he has so many ways of blessing you. And people that have given to the Lord over the years can all testify how good God is. Last one, number 8, is remember the truth in Acts chapter 20, verse 35, that it is more blessed to give than to receive. And I thought for this, I don't know why, I have no idea why I got John D. Rockefeller in my mind, but now I know more about him than... So, John Rockefeller, Cleveland, Ohio, which is hard to believe. I know my wife's not far from Cleveland, where she grew up. John Rockefeller was just a normal guy that had nothing, didn't go to college. And he took like a correspondence course, short, to become like an accountant. And then, because he didn't have college and official schooling, he goes to all the businesses in Cleveland, knocking on their doors and say, hey, will you hire me? I want to be an accountant. And for months, all the businesses said, no, you don't have an education. You have no experience. No. But he kept every day going back to the same businesses, sometimes twice a day to the same businesses. Oh, for months, he said, my full-time job is to drive everyone crazy until someone hires me. And one day, you're here all the time. We'll hire you as an accountant. But somehow he starts saving and investing. He has zero money, saving and investing. And over the next 20 years, 30 years, he becomes the wealthiest man that has probably ever lived. He's even wealthier percentage-wise than Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, is that? Rockefeller owned 3% of the whole country. And he owned 90%, he made his money in oil and railroad. He owned 90% of all the oil in the country. And the Supreme Court said he had a monopoly on all the energy supply, and so they broke up his one company into 34 companies. When they broke up his company into 34, that was the beginning of Shell, Mobil, Exxon, and all these companies that they're all broken up from his one company. But John Rockefeller got shares, like equal shares in every one of those 34 companies. And then every one of those 34 companies went through the roof, and his wealth went crazy, way more than if it had stayed as one company. At 50 years old, John Rockefeller's health was completely destroyed from living for making money. Now, I have to tell you, he is a born-again Christian. But he has destroyed, he literally wore himself out. That verse I gave you, Proverbs 23:4, do not wear yourself out to get rich. He wore himself so many health problems that the doctors came to him at age 50, 51, and said, you have only actually 1 year left to live, and then you are going to die. And so John Rockefeller says, okay, I got 1 year left to live. I am going to, he's been going to church, but he's decided, I am going to give my wealth away. And he's going to attempt to give 1/2 of his wealth away. Now, the story is that as fast as he gave it away, his companies were bringing in more money then. So he starts giving it away for that year. And this joy and this satisfaction comes upon him that by the end of the year, his health is restored and he winds up living into his 90s. Giving, like spending the rest of his life just giving and blessing people. He was a faithful Baptist member his whole life in I don't know what I want to call this Baptist church. Regular people. They came to John Rockefeller and said, now that you're the wealthiest man in the world, may we recommend to you the Presbyterian church or the Episcopalian church, a church of higher standard. And John Rockefeller said, no, I'm going to go to the church that preaches the gospel that's for anyone. And you'll see if you read that, he taught Sunday school. Do you remember the days you went to church Sunday morning, Sunday evening, went to prayer meeting. I see their prayer meeting was Friday night. He faithfully attended, taught Sunday school, and often volunteered to be the janitor in the church. The wealthiest guy in the world often was, we need the church clean, I will volunteer and clean the church and witness. It was an incredible story of a Christian living for God and witnessing for him. It's more blessed to give than to receive. All right, let's come to Luke 16 now. So with that in the background, Luke 16 is a parable about giving, and it is considered the most confusing parable in the Bible. Okay? And I'll show you why in a second here. But in fact, when I bounced this parable this week off of people, they're like, yeah, that's one parable I just don't understand. I don't get it. So let's go through it bit by bit. And I have to, I guess, start out by telling you that Jesus is using a secular illustration to make a spiritual application and truth. So you have to realize the first part of this story, it does have some application to us spiritually, but it's a secular story. Do not use this as God is telling you to do this, all right? So, chapter 16, verse 1, Jesus told his disciples, this is to believers, by the way, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. Now, it is true that in some sense, God is the one that owns everything. And we are all managers in God's company. God entrusts us all with different amounts of money and gifts and skills and abilities and talents, okay? But it's all owned by the Lord. And we're just managers. And we often are very guilty of not being very good with what God gives us. We can be wasteful. So verse 2. So the boss, he called the manager in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management because you cannot be manager any longer. He's going to fire him, okay? He's not firing him right then and there, but he's going to fire him soon. And someday, all of us are going to stand before God, and we will have to give an account. 2 Corinthians 5:10, that for all of us, all believers will stand before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one of us will receive what is due, whether good or bad deeds done while we were in the body on this earth. It's not about going to heaven. Going to heaven is in Jesus Christ. But now our eternal rewards are determined by how well were we managing what God gave us. So verse 3. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master has taken away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm too ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. And referring to not only will they help me out, but maybe I'll get a job if I think ahead here. So this is what he does. He's going to cook the books. So that's how I got that title for the sermon, Cooking the Books. Verse 5. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil. That's a lot of money. He replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Cut it in half. I just saved you millions of dollars. All right, 50% discount. Cook the books, he'll never know. Then he calls in the next guy. And obviously he didn't like the next guy quite as much. He says, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. Hey, make it 800. He only gave him a 20% discount. So I'm like, oh. But you get the idea. Like, hey, you take this down. He's cooking the books. All these people love him, you know. So verse 8, the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. Now understand, this is a secular illustration. This is where Christians get confused. They think they're trying to make God the master in this whole thing, and we're the managers, and so God is commending a dishonest Christian. Does everyone follow that? So that's a Christian. I'm going to rip off at my company and I'm going to do this, because God commends the dishonest manager. God's going to go, well done, ripping off, your boss. Okay. Do not think that way. Okay. Secular illustration. But the master is kind of chuckling to himself in commending his manager and like, you are incredibly smart and shrewd. I miscalculated what you would do to solidify opportunities for yourself after I fire you. You understand, of course he's not happy that he lost all this money, but he's like, why, you little devil, you got one on over me. I was thinking to myself, he's probably saying, you've learned well from me. So, but this is just an illustration. The punchline comes in verse 9. I tell you, Jesus, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves. This is what the bad manager did. Use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into what? Eternal dwellings. So what Jesus is saying is, use to the believers, just like this crazy manager who, by canceling the debts, would be welcomed into their homes. Jesus is saying, use your worldly wealth to gain friends, to win people to Jesus, so that someday when you go to heaven, you will be welcomed into what? Eternal dwellings. That's the dwellings of people in heaven that you've won to the Lord. Now, I know this is going to be hard to believe, but there are different mansions in heaven. Jesus said, in my Father's house is heaven. In my Father's house, there are many mansions. There are many mansions. There's going to be a lot of believers who have mansions in heaven. In fact, the very next verse, Jesus says, if this weren't so, I wouldn't tell you this. So listen up. I'm not exaggerating. There are mansions in heaven. And I'm telling you, I'm not lying to you that this isn't real. These are eternal dwellings. When you go to heaven and people are there because of your giving and they came to the Lord, they're going to welcome you into their eternal dwellings in heaven and say, thank you because of your giving, your sacrifice, your serving in the church. I met Jesus, and you are welcome into my home in heaven. So let me back up to verse 8. I forgot to share something with you. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. There's two groups of people. There's people of this world, and there's people of the light. The people of this world are all the people that live on the earth that are completely focused on bringing heaven to the earth. They are trying to win the whole world, yet they're going to forfeit their souls. This is the earth right here. It's this little dot right here. So there are many people that are only focused on the earth. And their whole life is focused in the here and now, and they take no consideration for their eternal retirement. Those are people of the world. And then there are people of the light. God is light. There are people that see beyond this world and realize there's a whole universe and there is a God and we live forever. And these are the people of the light, believers that understand it's not worth gaining the whole world and yet forfeiting your soul when there is so much in store in the future. So use your finances to win people to Jesus. When you give to the church, we're all partners together. Everyone that comes to the Lord in this church, whether it's Awana, whether it's Upward, whether it's in the services, we all share alike. When we get to heaven, God's going to show the interconnection of your giving and how that led people to the Lord. When you give to missions, last year we gave over $250,000 to mission. You've given millions to missions in the 10 years I've been here. We never see what happens to that money. It goes overseas to hundreds of countries. But someday you're going to get to heaven, and God's going to show how your giving went to, a pastor in another country who led 100 people to the Lord, and those 100 people led thousands of people to the Lord, and it'll all be tied back to the giving that you gave, though you don't see it now. So there's a song, and the song is about 30 years old, and I don't want to get into the author of the song, but the song shares this truth. I dreamed I went to heaven, you were there with me. We walked along the streets of gold beside the crystal sea. We heard the angels singing, then someone called your name. You turned and saw a young man. He was smiling as he came. He said, friend, you may not know me now. But then he said, but wait, you used to teach my Sunday school. When I was only 8, every week you would say a prayer before the class would start. One morning when you said that prayer, I asked Jesus in my heart. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I'm so glad you gave. Then another man stood before you and said, remember the time a missionary came to your church? His pictures made you cry. You didn't have much money, but you gave it anyway. Jesus took the gift you gave, and that's why I'm here today. One by one they came, as far as the eye could see, each one somehow touched by your generosity. Little things that you had done, sacrifices made unnoticed on the earth, heaven now proclaims. And I know up in heaven that you're not supposed to cry, but I was almost sure there were tears in your eyes as Jesus took your hand and you stood before the Lord and he said, my child, look around you, for great is your reward. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I'm so glad you gave. Yeah, powerful. So look at verse 10. Christians, this is to all of us. And this is very solemn. This is like, whoa. Verse 10. Whoever can be trusted with very little. I don't care how much money you have on the earth. It's little compared to what God has, right? Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, so God's giving us worldly wealth right now. If we have not been trustworthy in using it to win people to Jesus, he says, who will trust you with true riches? God says, I have riches that you can't even imagine. But if I couldn't trust you with the little bit I gave you on the earth, and you used it completely selfishly and not to win people to Jesus, you think I'm giving you real riches in heaven? I don't think so. You just forfeited that. If I can't trust you with a little when you're on the earth, I'm not trusting you with anything when you get to heaven. And it gets even tougher, verse 12. And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, everything that we have is God's property that he's lent to us, then God says, who's going to give you property of your own? So God's saying, it reminds me of this illustration back here. God said, I actually had a planet picked out for you with a wonderful mansion. I was going to give this property to you, but you just forfeited that. I couldn't trust you with the property I gave you on earth to use it for God's glory, some of it. You think I'm giving you a mansion in heaven? So you understand, Christians, we all get to heaven because of Jesus Christ. And many believers have been investing in the souls of people by giving. And you're going to have mansions and planets. I don't know. God's going to entrust you with incredible true riches. But some of you are going to be homeless in heaven. You're going to get there. But you might have to live in a tent. And you might have to apply for welfare in heaven. That's what God's saying there. That's what Jesus is saying to the disciples. If I can't trust you with a little, do not think I'm giving you true riches in glory. Do not think I'm giving you an eternal property of your own. If you can't serve me now, don't be looking forward. Yeah, you're in heaven, but don't think you're getting a whole lot. Now, I want to close with, this is my couple. And it's funny, people in the church have been trying to figure out who these people are. In fact, they went up to one couple and said, are you the couple that's being financially counseled? And I said, I think that couple looks Japanese or Chinese. But I could see, Tucker could, a little bit like you, maybe. You're a man and he's a man. Doesn't look like Paula, though. So this guy is a financial advisor, and he's been working with this couple. Now, I'm making this up, right? You with me? I stole this picture. I paid for it. So they want to retire, and just to change it up, they want to retire to Alaska. I know most people want to retire to Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, but this couple wants to retire to Alaska. How many of you want to retire to Alaska? That sounds good to you. All right, none of you. So I did look, believe it or not. Oh, and the other two services, there was like one person in each service. And I'm like, why? If you go to Alaska, there's only one person per square mile on average. You can have your own square mile to yourself. Okay, if you go to Florida, you have to share that square mile with like thousands of other people. But Alaska, just you. So they all were like, well, we like hunting, fishing. And I'm like, and hopefully you like igloos too. Okay, so, but this couple wants to retire in Alaska. Now, let me ask you a question. So this has been their financial advisor for years, right? Let me ask you a question. Is his job just to help them get enough money so that they can get a ticket to fly to Alaska when they retire? What do you think? No. He doesn't want them just to have enough money to buy the ticket to get to Alaska. What does he want them to be able to do when they arrive in Alaska? Have money to do what? To buy a house, a nice retirement home, and then how long to live on their retirement income? The rest of their lives, which could be how long if they retire at 65? Yeah. I mean, I better not mention how old some people are in our church. They are so amazing and active. And if I told you who they were, you would know who they are. And they're like 95 years old. It's like incredible. So they've been like, you could be in retirement 30 years, 35 years. Okay, so you understand the goal of this guy is not only to get them to Alaska, but he wants them to have enough money that they can buy a nice home and they can live comfortably for 30 years. Do you get that? Does that make sense to you? Okay. I'm your spiritual financial advisor. Okay? So goal number one is I want to get you a ticket to heaven. Now, how much is that going to cost you? It's free. Okay? The ticket to get you to heaven is free. Well, I shouldn't say free. It was actually paid for by Jesus Christ on the cross, right? But if that's all I did was get you to heaven, then I have failed, because the other part, the second part of my ministry is not that you just get to heaven, but that you have a mansion. And that for all eternity, you can look back pleased that you serve the Lord on the earth, and those rewards, those riches go with you for all eternity. I'm hoping you guys all have mansions so I can come visit you in your mansion in case I have a tent. Okay. But you understand that's my second important role, is that I want all of you to get to heaven, and not just I live totally for myself. I'm just happy I got to heaven, and I spent all my money on myself. I did everything for myself, but praise God, I'm in heaven. But I want you to be able to always look back for billions of years later and realize there are people that are there because you gave, you loved, you served, and you. So that's my second mission in life. Father, I know I'm really preaching to the choir, because these, Lord, the saints in this church are amazingly in love with you, and many know Jesus Christ as their Savior and Lord. And Lord, this church is amazing in giving love, giving finances, serving. Like 80% of our church volunteers, and it's just amazing people here. But bless us, Lord. Give each of us wisdom how to use the gifts, the money, the talents, our homes, to win people to Jesus Christ, so that when we get to heaven, people's lives will be changed because we sacrificially gave of ourselves. So anoint us with the Spirit of God and guide us. And Lord, we're going to sing a song that, you know, one of the ways to give, a special way to give, is to lift up our hands, of giving all of our being to you, and to just praise you and worship you. In your name we pray. Amen.